Why does the black man serve the white man? Why does everything the black man do benefit the white man? Why does the black man say freedom is doing what I want to do? And why is it that everything he wants to do enriches the European?
Welcome to the desert of the real.
Peace, family. This is your brother, Mr. Holipsism. Was having a discussion on Facebook, and I realized something, and it might be my fault. There's a good chance that it's my fault that people don't really understand what I mean or where I'm coming from where I say a socio-economic and political infrastructure. The key word in that is infrastructure. And it's so strange because, like when you talk about something so much, you always think that you've covered it. But when I look through my videos, I look through like even my old videos, 'cause I have a list of my old videos, even though I don't, have them posted. And there was one video I did with infrastructure, but it wasn't really me talking about it. It was like a show, and we touched on it briefly or whatever. But I said to myself, man, I don't have one video strictly dedicated toward what an infrastructure really means. And so I guess the source of my frustration comes from, people not understanding what that means and trying to build a conversation, off of that rather than engaging in these small, minute details or insignificant things that people tend to talk about that have nothing to do with infrastructure. So I'm constantly frustrated because it's almost like an architect, or no, it's like a scientist trying to have an intellectual discussion with a lab rat. If you're not another scientist, then how can you possibly be on the same wavelength and understand all of the things that I'm talking about when you're dealing on a lab rat level? You're dealing with somebody who's caught in the maze, and then you're trying to have this scientific discussion about how things should be. That's part of the problem with our conversations in the African Senate progressive demographic, but also in the so-called conscious community graphic as well. So what I wanted to do with this video is just break down what exactly I mean when I say infrastructure. The overall point of this video, and I guess my main thesis for this video, is that infrastructure in terms of our infrastructure as a people is a technical problem. Religion, spirituality are personal issues and have no place in technical discussions. Now I'm going to elaborate more into that. But first I want to give you what the definition of infrastructure is according to Merriam-Webster. Now, I took the definition from various sources, other like online dictionary, free dictionary, dictionary reference. I went through a bunch of different dictionaries for the meaning, and I just grouped them into the main three. Infrastructure is the underlying foundation or basic framework as of a system or an organization. B, it could be the permanent installations required for military purposes. And C is the system of public works of a country, state, or region. Also the resources, such as personnel, buildings, or equipment required for an activity. Now, to expand upon that definition, infrastructure is basic physical and organizational structures needed for the operation of a society or enterprise, or the services and facilities necessary for an economy to function. It can be generally defined as the set of interconnected structural elements that provide framework supporting an entire structure of development. It is an important term for judging a country or region's development. So when you want to judge how modern a country is, then you look at the infrastructure. The term typically refers to the technical structures that support a society, such as roads, bridges, water supply, sewers, electrical grids, telecommunications, and so forth, and can be defined as the physical components of interrelated systems providing commodities and services essential to enable, sustain, or enhance societal living conditions. Viewed functionally, infrastructure facilitates the production of goods and services, and also the distribution of finished products to markets, as well as basic social services such as schools and hospitals. For example, roads enable the transport of raw materials to a factory. In military, the term refers to buildings and permanent installations necessary for the support, deployment, and operation of military forces. To make it simple, infrastructure is anything that is needed every day. It's an everyday item. Now, there are two types of infrastructure. One is hard infrastructure, and the other is soft infrastructure. Hard infrastructure refers to the large physical networks necessary for the functioning of a modern industrial nation. So those are like fixed physical networks, you know, for a nation, and mostly a modern industrial nation, because that's when the term infrastructures, I think infrastructure came into existence in around 1920s or 40, something like that. I'm not quite sure, but I'll check on that. Soft infrastructure refers to all the institutions which are required to maintain the economic health and cultural and social standards of a country, such as the financial system, the educational system, the healthcare system, the system of government, law enforcement, as well as emergency services. Soft infrastructure is what I usually speak of when I say a socio-economic and political infrastructure. When I say that, I'm referring to the soft infrastructure. And that may be the reason why I sense a lot of confusion in people. Because before you can get the soft infrastructure, you have to get the hard infrastructure in place. And the hard infrastructure, those large physical networks that's necessary, like in other words, let's say you go into when Haiti was decimated by tornadoes and floods or whatever. It destroyed their infrastructure. It destroyed, the country was literally destroyed. Now, if we were a properly functional nation, whenever you have a country whose infrastructure has been destroyed, there's a silver lining in that, because what you can do is start from scratch. And that's to lay down the wiring, the piping, the irrigation system, the electrical grid. You will lay down all of that hard infrastructure in the very beginning to fortify yourself and that land for soft infrastructure, which will get into the economics, the health and cultural, social, financial, educational, health, and all of that, all of those other branches and institutions. Now, infrastructure has no bias or prejudice within itself. It merely supports the everyday workings of a society or nation. And I think that this is the part that I feel a lot of people don't really understand, especially when I start talking about it. I don't feel they get what I'm saying, and then they start railing off on something else. Usually revolving around personal issues like religion, spirituality, you know, just feelings, emotions, and stuff like that. Infrastructure doesn't care about who you are. Infrastructure doesn't care what you believe in. Infrastructure, I mean, look at the city that you live in. And if you're in New York, New York is a great representation of what I'm talking about. Um, New York has the train systems, and within the train systems, you have like the A train, which would be considered like the main artery If this was a body, the A train would be the main artery, because the A train goes from Queens through Brooklyn, Manhattan, and the Bronx, all the way through. It's like the longest line. So what do you have when you in that system there? You have all these tunnels, all these pipings, all this electrical work going on. And then you have Con Ed, which is the power company in New York, in the 5 boroughs, and in Westchester. They have the infrastructure for the electrical grid, and then the piping and the wires, and for the gas and everything. That's infrastructure. Now, everybody has to pay an electric bill. Everybody has to pay a gas bill. Everybody has to ride the trains. And I'll just use those as examples. Those are infrastructure. Nobody asked you what your religion is when you pay to get on the train. I'll even include roads and highways and tolls in this too, because that's a part of transportation. Nobody asked you what your religious denomination is. Nobody asked you, did you pray today? Did you face Mecca? Nobody asked you any of that. The infrastructure doesn't care about that. The infrastructure is there to be the basis upon which you build the soft structure, and it maintains the entire society. So until we start thinking on that level, we're never going to understand what nationhood really means. Because right now we're getting caught up in a bunch, and that's why people railed on me a little bit because I made the video talking about the homosexual agenda. I'm tired of talking about social issues. I'm just tired of it because it's irrelevant. It means nothing. Which gets back, well, which doesn't get back, which leads me to my next point. When you're designing infrastructure, what's more important? The STEM fields or religion and spirituality? And when I say STEM field, that's STEM. What am I talking about? I'm talking about science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's no religious or spiritual way to design an irrigation system or a power grid. You have to, that's a technical issue. You got to be an engineer. So, how can I put it? Remember that movie 2012? I believe that what it was. It was 2012, where the world was being destroyed based on the Mayan prophecy. Like the whole world was just went into they started caving in. The California sunk into the ocean and blah blah blah. It just the whole place was decimated. They knew that this was going to happen 2 years in advance. So they built arcs. Each country built their own arcs. And there was only a certain amount of people that can get inside of those arcs. Now, if you see that movie, and just use basic logic and common sense, I didn't see anybody going, wait a minute, where's the pastors? Where's the preachers? Where's the rabbis? Where's the imams? We got to get them on this ark. I didn't see that. I didn't hear it. Oh, but I did hear people talking about scientists, people talking about physicists, all of the people in the mathematicians, engineers, all the people in the STEM fields. Those are the people that they wanted on those arcs. Why? Because when you're building a society, or when you're starting a society new, you're going to need scientists, you're going to need technology, you're going to need engineers, you're going to need mathematicians, you're going to need physicists, you're going to need doctors, you're going to need biologists, you're going to need people who are technically oriented. Now, if we all talk about nationhood, and we all are serious about building a nation, if you want to be successful in building this nation, then this means that you have to attract STEM field experts, people who are in the STEM fields, in the fields of science, in the fields of technology, in the fields of engineering, in the fields of mathematics. You have to attract them. And I can tell you this, you can't attract people in the STEM fields with religion, with spirituality, with emotions, or with rhetoric. So if you expect to get engineers to come and be a part of this nation, to come help you build and contribute their talents to making sure this thing gets done, maybe you need to pipe down on the white man is the devil, cracker this, and beat, fuck these devils. What the hell does that have to do? And you're not gonna get those type of people and those type of personalities to be a part of any movement that you're doing, because those people are attracted to logic, they're attracted to reasoning, they're attracted to facts, evidence, and data. That's it. And the opportunity of building something new or making progress. That's what attracts these people. So the problem with us, I should say the problem with the conscious community, because I think African-centered progressives are a little bit different. Like every African-centered progressive that I know of is well aware of what infrastructure means, but you won't find a real vast understanding and knowledge of that in the so-called conscious community, because they're concentrating on social issues. So if somebody is gay, they're caught up in, oh, fuck these faggots, da 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 da. I ain't got. Who gives a shit? If I got a guy who's an astrophysicist or a guy who can design an irrigation system, he's an expert in his field, do you think I give a fuck who he sleeps with? How is that relevant to what he has to do to help us in regards to our nation? But see, if you're thinking like a scientist, if you're thinking like an engineer, then these social issues wouldn't even enter your mind, because all you want to know is this guy an expert in his field? Is he good at what he does? That's it. Now, how can you tell if you're speaking to a STEM field expert, like somebody who's in science and technology and engineering and mathematics, or if you're speaking to somebody who's a lab rat? Usually, the key indicator is an old saying that I think it was said by Eleanor Roosevelt. I'm not quite sure, so correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But I have this on my desk so that I can never forget it. Great minds discuss ideas. Average minds discuss events. Small minds discuss people. And the reason why I point that out is I had posted something on my Facebook page, and I want to read it to you. I mean, I was going to just tell you what it says, but I think it's better for me to just read it to you. And I posted this, and I said, whenever I see a member of the vague abstraction commonly referred to as the so-called conscious community railing against going on and being overly emotional and immersed and focused on, quote unquote, the white man, it always reminds me of that classic argue, slap, kiss Hollywood cliche. Like this one, for example.
Screw you, Kimball! You're not so difficult to figure out yourself.
Yeah, what'd you figure out?
Nothing! It's driving me crazy. Who are you?
I gotta go.
No. Not until you give me my job back.
Move.
You fired me because you like me. You like me and you don't know what to do about it. Just admit it!
Okay, I like you.
Admit it! Oh. I'm so sorry. You do?
Can I go now?
Huh?
I keep imagining an abrupt end to the argument between the angry conscious community member and the quote-unquote white man, ending with the white man pulling him towards him by their red, black, and green outfit, grabbing them by the back of their neck, and the both of them engaging in a passionate kiss. After they kiss, they hold each other, and the conscious community member says, I don't understand why you act the way you do. Don't you know I love you? There's a thin line between love and hate. Emotions wane, which is why movement should never be based on anger, but principles. If you want that movement to last. Otherwise, as soon as your anger stops, so will the movement. When you have a movement based on principles, your strategies and tactics may change, but the principles of the movement remain the same. And then I quoted my quote that I told you that I keep on my desk. The whole point of this video is this. You cannot build an infrastructure with rhetoric. You cannot build an infrastructure with emotions. You cannot build an infrastructure with spirituality. And you cannot build an infrastructure with religion. All of those things are social issues. Your religion is your own personal business. Who you sleep with is your own personal business. How you feel about certain things is your own personal business. When it comes down to an irrigation system where you can separate the water that you drink from the water that you use to shit in your toilet and wash in, you need experts. You need people that are specialists in that field. When it comes to electrical grids or power grids, I won't say electrical, but power grids, because I feel that we can move. I feel that we're living in a solar system, so we should definitely be able to harness solar energy, wind, and tidal, and geothermal, and all of that shit, and do it where we can power this earth by simply the sun and all of the natural environment of the earth. You know, we don't need fossil fuels to do that. We have so many natural things that we can use to power the earth, then we should be trying to move toward that. But, you know, that's another discussion. I don't want to get into that right now. But my main point in saying all of this is, if we are going to attract people to help us build these things, or if that's our intention, if we go to a piece of land in Africa, and we decide that we want to do some building or some moving or some creating of an infrastructure or whatever, we're going to need scientists, we're going to need physicists, we're going to need biologists, we're going to need all the people of the STEM fields: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And the only way you're going to attract those people is with logic and with reasoning, with common sense, evidence, facts, data. So to all of my people who are African-centered progressives who are on that vibe, on the infrastructure vibe, do not waste your time talking with people who want to deal with social issues, who want to sit there and talk about whether the Bible says that two men shouldn't sleep with each other and this, that, and whatever, or the Bible says this about that, or so-and-so did this because that's, I don't care, what this one has a white girl, or this one dating Chinese, and this one doing, listen, I'm not dismissing religion and spirituality. I'm saying that once the infrastructure is built and the infrastructure is in place, you can be whatever the hell you want to be, because you're going to be powering that system. You're going to be powering and maintaining that infrastructure by you living in it. So you can be what you want to be. You can worship what you want to worship. I'm not against that. I'm really just feel that it's irrelevant to the discussion right now. So, I mean, that's my basic point. I don't really have anything more to say than that. I hope that I got my point across and people understand where I'm coming from. If you don't, leave some questions in the comments and I'll try to answer as best as I can. But anyway, I just wanted to get that out the way because I was getting a lot of problems trying to communicate what infrastructure means. I just felt a lack of understanding of what that word meant because I kept going over the same arguments over and over again. So I hope people understand what infrastructure really means, and I hope that I helped you understand it. And like I said, if I didn't, ask me further questions and I'll try to answer them if I can. All right? Talk to you good people later, and I'm sorry this took over 20-something minutes, but peace.